Hi there. I'm popping in before this full podcast to let you know about an update that happened after this was all edited and put together. When I interviewed Sharik for this episode, I had never met him before or tried the Rezzimax Tuner myself. Since our interview, I got one of these devices and brought it to my family Christmas gathering and got to try it on random family members for various ailments, from headaches to shoulder pain to knee injuries and back pain. The feedback was all very positive, and I'm excited to continue using it and trying it for other concerns. If you're interested in getting one of these devices, check out the show notes for a link, and you can use the discount code Bethany Lewis, all one word, for $25 off your purchase. Enjoy the podcast. Hi, friends. Thank you for tuning in to the Concussion Coach podcast. I'm Bethany Lewis, the Concussion Coach. I'm a neurological occupational therapist and certified life coach, and I specialize in guiding people through their concussion recovery journey. I am passionate about helping people understand their injury, speed up their recovery, and reclaim control over their life post-concussion. The purpose of this podcast is to help increase awareness of concussions and the impact they can have on a person's life, and to bring hope to people who have suffered a concussion and those who love them. I firmly believe that sharing stories and knowledge about concussions will bring important light and understanding to this misunderstood and often invisible injury. The information in this podcast is meant to bring that awareness and hope and is not meant as medical advice. The opinions shared are those of the interviewees and my own. If you are suffering with lingering concussion symptoms, I have created a concussion coaching program specifically for you. I will be your mentor to guide you through your recovery journey, offering help with understanding and managing your symptoms, setting achievable goals, and learning how to manage your own thoughts and nervous system in order to get control over your life again. If this program sounds like something that would help you or someone you love, sign up for a free consultation. In the consultation, you'll get valuable information and resources and gain hope for your future. Sign up for your free consultation at the link in the show notes or at my website, www.theconcussioncoach.com. Hi, friends. Welcome back to the Concussion Coach podcast. I'm so excited for this interview today. My guest is Sharik Peck. He is the inventor of the Rezzimax Tuner, which is a device you may have heard about, and if you haven't, you're about to learn all about it. I know that we use it at Cognitive FX, but I haven't had much occasion to use it myself or with my clients directly, so I'm really excited to learn more about it and to pick Sharik's brain a little bit here. And I'm also excited to get to know Sharik better as well. My friend Corey Hardman, who was interviewed on episode 38, introduced us, and our email correspondence thus far has been delightful. So this is going to be a good conversation. Sharik has advanced degrees in physical therapy and rehabilitation counseling. He has spent over 28 years helping people eliminate pain from their lives. Sharik experienced several disabling accidents, including a broken neck and back, a stroke, a dislocated shoulder, and years of chronic pain. His research focused on resonance and its effect on the human nervous system. The Pain Tuner Pro is the result of over 12 years of research and development. He's been awarded 3 U.S. patents and 1 China patent. So super excited to talk to you, Sharik. Thank you so much for being here today.
Absolutely. And probably another important thing to list in there, Bethany, is it's made right here in Utah, and you're right here in Utah. So we've kind of kept things local.
That's very cool, actually. That's awesome. But it is, I know it's all over the world. It's benefiting people all over. So let's jump in. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself to start? Where are you from? What got you into physical therapy initially? And I just want to hear all the things. Ready, go.
I grew up here in northern Utah. I was a normal little kid working on the farms, learning to milk cows while I was very young. And somewhere along the way, I had gotten into wrestling. And a lot of my life changed dramatically when I hit 17 years of age, and I was in a wrestling match, and I got caught in a headlock. And in the last few seconds of this match, it ruptured a vertebral artery. And you have only got 4 major blood supply sources going into your brain, and I ruptured one of them, and it caused blood clots throughout my brain. And I spent the next 6 months or so trying to learn how to walk and how to talk and communicate and write. And so I learned from the inside out what it is like to have a brain that doesn't function very well anymore, and then what the process is for building it back to functioning very well. And I got to go through all of the really tough things that all of our individuals who have had concussions get to experience. The depression that comes along with it, the misunderstanding of so many people that look at you and say, you know, you look like you're normal, but they can't understand that your brain can't process and put two and two together and come up with four. And the difficulties around that time created within me, as I started to improve my functioning and get back my ability to communicate well and to learn again, I decided to dedicate my life to trying to help others who had been in similar circumstances. And that really is why I became a physical therapist. I decided to dedicate my life to helping those who had been in similar circumstances. If you take a few other instances that happened earlier in life, though, 2 years before that, I'd broken my back, and I got to learn what that's like to have excruciating spinal pain. And we found that the reason that I had an instability that caused this rupture of a vertebral artery actually happened when I was 2. I got dumped on my head, and we didn't know it, but I spent years with my neck kinked off to the side and my spine growing this weird curvature. And I was fortunate enough to have some excellent chiropractors that helped my mom learn how to straighten me back up. But I had this instability in my neck that set me up for a vertebral artery dissection. There's too much play in my neck because I don't have an odontoid process. And you know what that causes with the instability in the neck. We just didn't know. But I'd broken my neck as a 2-year-old. I'd had a fracture of my spine. I had all of these little things that just kind of added up to helping me be prepared, maybe be open, if you will, for trying to understand how to help the world with a lot of their chronic pain needs. And
that perspective, that's a beautiful thing.
Well, it really makes good sense if you take a look further. I mean, what we're talking about, I'm talking about the physical body, but we're talking about the brain and how it functions. That's really the driver behind everything that the physical body and the healing systems do. The brain is the controller. And as I started to understand that better through my years of being a physical therapist, I wanted to do more. I wanted to get further and further inside the brain and the control mechanism to try and affect the chronic conditions I was trying to treat in the clinic. And that was tough. You know what that's like in practice. And you want to go in and make these great changes for people. I think that it was a long, lot of years of study that helped me come to an understanding. In fact, one night I woke up with this concept that just would not leave me. And the concept was this. In fact, the message, it was literally a message, and it said, Sharik, vibration will heal the human nervous system. Now you go figure out how. That was the exact message. And, I paid a lot of attention to that first part of the message. But the conundrum that has now been 14 years of research was what happened in the second part of that message. And that's when I figured out that whatever powers there are in the universe, and if this is a God message for me, that God has a sense of humor. Because that go find out, you go figure out how, has put me on years of research trying to understand how to be able to utilize such a simple and yet complex thing as vibration. Vibration, you can look at a jackhammer and call that a massive vibration device. Not at all therapeutic, but definitely a source of vibration. And you can look at a musical instrument, any musical instrument that can play with strings, a piano, a violin, notes on a flute. They create this harmonic vibrational resonance that can be extremely therapeutic. And so my research has taken years to try and understand what that message meant that I got in the middle of the night. But it's all about energy. And if you can understand the concept of and the flow and the ebb of energy, and you can focus it into the central nervous system, you can create these incredible changes that start to help a person function better.
It's so fascinating. Okay, I have so many questions. Let's come back for a second to when you were 17 though. I'm curious when you were wrestling, when that happened, was it like an immediate emergency, like you knew something had happened and you were like from that point on not able to walk and talk the way you were? Was it pretty immediate?
It was absolutely immediate, and if a trainer had not seen me collapse, I would not have lived through the day.
Oh,
And fortunately, somebody saw it. Somebody grabbed an ambulance. I had to be flown. They flew me to Salt Lake City to the LDS hospital there, and immediately put me in the intensive care unit. I was just extremely blessed through the whole thing. When I got to the intensive care unit, the neurologist looked at me and looked at the signs and looked at the massive amount of blood that had created these blood clots throughout my brain and cerebellum. And he said, look, if he makes it through today, I'm going to give him a 10% chance of living.
wow.
And if he can make it till tomorrow, till the next day, I'll give him another 10%. I mean, it was just, I look back at it now and I know all of the functions of the brain now. And it's so complex and so amazing. The fact that you and I are having this conversation right now is the percentages that could be calculated back then would have said that this is never possible. The doctors told my mom and my dad that if I survived through the hospital experience and if my body started to heal, that I would be in a nursing facility the rest of my life.
Holy cow.
So I believe in miracles, and I'm a witness to them.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. And how long at that point, it sounds like the prognosis was fairly dire, but how long did it end up taking to get to a point where you were able to go back to school and do things again?
About 10 days into the rehabilitation process, my body started, my eyes started to converge again, and I started to be able to clarify my world. The numbness slowly left, the paralysis in the left side of my body, it slowly started to work its way out. And by 8 weeks later, I was starting my senior year in high school, and I was actually able to be there. Now, with some significant deficits, but I was able to go back and complete my senior year in high school. I had to drop out of all of my difficult and challenging classes, and I was put into very remedial classes just to be able to get through that time. But slowly, as movement started to improve and as my brain started to function better, it was about 6 months later that I could actually coordinate things good enough that I could drive a car again. And no, it was nothing short of a miracle. And you have seen clients like this. You've seen patients. The year that my injury occurred, I think there were 13 similar sports-related vertebral artery dissections, and mine was the only case that had a good recovery.
Yeah, miracles do happen, and they also don't happen, and it beyond us to understand why or how. But looking back for you, I can see why. We can see some of why, but it is in the moment and at that time, it's so hard to understand. But that's amazing. And so then you went into physical therapy, and did you immediately go into brain related PT, or did you spend time in other areas first? How did that come about?
So actually, after this injury and after all that had gone on, I was fortunate enough to be invited to be a missionary in a foreign country, and I got to learn a language, and that's really what got my brain working good again.
Wow.
See, when I finished and completed high school, there's no way that I could have gone through the classes needed to go into physical therapy school. But learning a second language after my injury was extremely difficult, extremely hard. But all of that combined effort and the learning and the memorizing helped my brain to start being able to function very well again. And it was such a miracle for me. But after I had finished being a missionary for my church in Brazil, I came home and started into college and found that my brain worked better for learning the things that I wanted to learn than it ever had before in my life. I had to work a lot harder. I had to put in hours and hours because my short-term memory didn't work very well for years after my stroke. But I could put things into long-term memory and they're there forever. And I found that I could utilize that. I just had to work my tail off to get the things in there. And so going through school, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do other than I wanted to help people. And so I spent maybe 20 years in just normal physical therapy. I became an ergonomics expert and worked in the prevention arena, trying to help major companies prevent injuries from occurring or minimize the effects of an injury and get a person back to functioning really well within their work environment. But this fascination with the brain and the central nervous system really came a little bit later as I started to watch all of the conditions that were difficult to treat. I mean, the fibromyalgias, these conditions like trigeminal neuralgia, and all of these chronic conditions, the chronic regional pain syndromes, and the things that were so hard to try and treat in practice. I became fascinated with those and wanted to understand them better. So about, oh gosh, it's maybe been 12 years ago now, I went back and I got a master's degree in counseling. I figured I need to understand a little bit better, what's happening inside of the brain to be able to understand this better. And so I looked at it from a counseling perspective. And then I started becoming more and more fascinated with all those things I'd learned in school years ago. And I started putting a lot of effort into trying to understand the brain mechanisms. So it's almost a third career for me at this point.
Yeah, it sounds like it. So were you dealing with chronic pain yourself? Like, is that why, did that maybe have something to do with why you were interested in what you were seeing in practice?
I've been in pain all my life. I mean, I'd never remember a day without pain.
Mm.
But when you've been in pain all your life, you either focus on it and you think about it, and the concentration that you give pain gives it an energy all of its own. And I never had really put a lot of effort and energy into it. But it was when I started to see my wife, as we entered a very stressful phase of our lives, have 7 children. And those children created a lot more demand on my dear wife than it did on me. But as she was going through and trying to take care of those, and I added an awful lot more stress onto the pile by insisting that I needed to be self-employed and creating all kinds of other stressors. But we got to a point with her where she could not turn her neck. And she had so much pain. And it was like that for several years. She could hardly move her neck and her jaw was all locked up. And one day as I was poking and prodding on her, I pushed on a spot on her jaw and she levitated. I mean, I think she screamed and she rose up off of the table that I was working on her. She rose up, I think, 2 feet high. And I realized that there are buttons you can push on the body that must have an entry straight into the brain. And on her jaw, I had found one of those. And I started to, try and understand that better. So I spent several years trying to understand how to get a person that's in severe chronic pain. And I realized that chronic pain and chronic stress are the exact same channels because you don't have one without the other. But when we looked at the stress that she was under and the pain that she was having, and I took her to every provider I could think of to try and get her some help, because the tools that I had in my physical therapy practice were not really making those changes for her. And this is where I started to understand a lot of components about the jaw and its relationship to the brain and the stress response and all of these cervical muscles and their connections. So I spent years diving into the anatomy and the physiology to understand what was going on here. It's where I started to understand the incredible role of the vagus nerve in the healing response. Mm-hmm. So this is kind of a circuitous conversation, but that was my path in life. It was very, I was kind of meandering all over the place until I realized, oh, there is a power and an energy and a source for healing, and God has already created within us a mechanism for how things work in the brain and in the nervous system. If you can take tools and treatment techniques and gear them towards getting the brain to start functioning better, you help a person be able to return to full happiness and full life. So that's what I've been concentrating on.
I love it. Wow. So I'm curious I'm bringing it back again a little bit. I'm with the pain that you were seeing you saw pain in your patients. You're really interested in that. You were focusing on like learning more about the chronic pain stuff. And then you decided to go into counseling. Was that because you saw that component of the mental and emotional piece to the physical pain? I assume that's what brought those together and drew you in that direction.
Yeah, that I thought that maybe I could find some of the answers in the counseling arena. Mm-hmm. I didn't. I don't practice counseling. I don't have a license to practice counseling, but I got the education and the information more to try and, I believe at this point, to help me understand what's going on with the mental emotional component of chronic pain. So you'll notice that a lot of the techniques that we've developed over time gear towards creating a happiness component inside of the brain. Giving hope to your patients is sometimes more important than helping them be able to move a body part.
Yes, 100%. Yes, I agree. And that it really, the mind, the body, the emotions is also so very intertwined, and each part is so important. And at different times, one is more important than the other, I think. But that's super interesting. And when you're talking about the jaw, I'm interested to hear more about that as well. I just know when I have had 6 kids and I used hypnobirthing. So I went without medication for 5 of those births, and used the relaxation techniques for it. And one of the things that was the most effective that I still use when I'm trying to get to sleep now is if I can relax the muscles around my eyes and my jaw and then go down into my neck and shoulders, I'm done. I'm gone. It's perfect. That is the key to relaxation for me. And so anyway, so when you were talking about how much the jaw is connected to the brain, I'm really interested in hearing more about that. And another points that you found. Let's hear about your journey. Well, actually, first, how long ago was it that you had that dream where you were told that vibration will heal the nervous system? Was that the message?
Yeah.
How long ago was that, and where in your story?
14 years ago. Okay. And
still practicing PT at that time, or had you done counseling at that point?
Still been practicing PT. Okay. I had not gone through the counseling component yet, but what was really, really fun about that is I kind of had to put it into words. I mean, I woke up about 3:00 in the morning and I turned to my wife and I said, I need an electric toothbrush. And she woke up and she's like, you have an electric toothbrush? And I said, no, I need one for my patients. And she said,
we're going to dentistry now? What is happening?
She said, "That's gross." And she turned over and went back to sleep. And I spent the rest of the night trying to put into words the message that had come to me. The message wasn't, "Sharik, you've got to have an electric toothbrush." I had one. But the message was vibration. I just couldn't put it into words. The only thing I could think of at the moment was, yeah, like my toothbrush vibrates. I need something that vibrates, but I could visualize it and I could see it, and I just started realizing, and it's funny that you bring up, those points like above the eyes, and I could visualize and see that if I could put vibration on these points, I could start to have a really profound effect on the central nervous system. Mm. And if you fast forward a couple of years to where we're finally creating some tools, because I first spent years trying to buy everything that I could find on the internet that vibrated and see if I could apply it and see if it would help a person. And I found that some things do, and some things are not really helpful on the nervous system, but they all call them vibration devices. Mm. And I realized very quickly too, don't do an internet search on vibrators, because, well,
dangerous game. Yeah.
Yeah, the world has a different view of vibration devices, but I found that there's a very pure form of vibrational energy, and then there's dirty forms. Mm-hmm. And we've tapped into a very pure form of vibrational energy. And when you apply that to certain pressure points, so one of our first patents was for this little device. I'll describe it for those who can't see it, but it's like a set of tuning forks or tongs, and it allows us to take a vibrational energy and transmit it into this apparatus that allows us to split the energies to where we have exactly the same energy coming out of a single point. We now have it in 2 points. And I had this cool experience one day. I was out riding my bicycle, and I had this download, one of these downloads that comes with, my body was suddenly covered with shivers. And then I'm like, hey, you guys keep riding bikes, go on. I've got to sit here and process something. And I sat there, drenched in sweat and shivering, and I saw in my mind this apparatus. And what it did was allow us to hit 2 nerves, or the same nerve, on both sides of midline for the cranial nerves, all of these around the head and neck, with exactly the same energies, which brings balance to your brain faster than just about anything. Mm. So we went about creating this little tool, and it took us several years and engineers to try and create this, but it would allow us to drive those energies into those pressure points. So everything that has become a part of the Rezzimax family of tools and techniques was born through experimentation and little heavenly downloads that happen from time to time to help provide understanding of how to be able to help people better.
Oh, I love that. So when was your first, like you said you bought all of the things you could find, and then when did you decide to start trying to develop your own thing, and how long has it been in the works?
Let's see. I think it's been now 9 or 10 years ago. We started approaching manufacturers because I found at that point, I'd experimented with other vibrational devices for 4 years, and I found that there are good components of some and bad components of some, and I had found a range of energy that seemed to work wonders. And it was a very, very simple concept. It is the purring range of a cat.
I kind of love that. Okay, keep going. That's awesome.
The purring range of a cat is not something that I invented, but somebody much, much, much smarter than me gave those little critters a way to heal through very difficult and challenging things. The problem was I could find very few vibrational devices. I couldn't find any that had that specific vibrational energy. And yet I could see on the internet and I could look up research and I could find incredible stories of how that purring of a cat could help heal just about anything. It speeds up bone healing by 66%. And I mean, there's incredible benefits to it, but nobody that I had ever seen. What's that?
You're making me want to get a cat. My daughter would be thrilled.
Well, I ended up with a cat, and I'm not a cat lover, but gosh, those little animals have a way of calming people. It's interesting. I had a fellow student in my master's degree program that had extreme anxiety, and she had this cat, and I said, "Well, you know what's the cat for?" And she says, "It's my therapy cat." And I'm like, "Yeah, right. Come on, how does that work?" She says, "No, when I'm in a panic attack, this cat will come and it'll plaster itself to my neck and chest, and it will purr and purr and purr until I am out of a panic attack and my brain is back functioning." So I started putting a lot of effort into understanding that energy range. It's a very narrow energy range. The purring of a cat, very different than the cat fight. The cat fight would be much more like our stressful everyday life in our world, but the purring of a cat is a very narrow range. And I started playing with taking a motor and putting it into that harmonic range. And we tapped into the front and the back and started developing this. Well, now we've even gone to the point of putting a utility patent on the range of energy that we have been able to generate and create, because it is unique. And then we've applied it to different tools, and we've created wings into one of our devices that creates this gua sha, or the scraping movement, to be able to pull in all of the proprioceptive channels in the skin and the ligaments and the tendons. Well, 9 years ago, we were in the infancy of this process. And I couldn't find anybody in the United States that would help us make this device. But I knew I needed to make it. So we found a group that worked with a company overseas, and they helped us to start producing our device overseas. We did that for about 4 years, and we built 4,000 of these devices. And during that time, we learned some incredible lessons. We had a wonderful Kickstarter. We ended up in the top 1% of Kickstarters that have ever been launched, because we created this excitement about a vibrational energy. And I learned some really important things. By the end of that, I learned, number one, I don't want to manufacture in other countries. It's all kinds of difficulty in communication, and the engineers don't speak the same language. And I mean, it's just very, very difficult to do. I applaud those who have done it successfully, but we could not. So 6 years ago, we approached a company right here in northern Utah, and we said, "Look, we've been manufacturing for 4 years now overseas. Is it possible that we could make these things right here?" And they said, "Well, it takes an awful lot." And I said, "Look, I've already put in an awful lot. Just help me figure out how to do it." And so they did. They started helping us to create our devices, to dial in the energies of the device. We took that purring range of a cat, and we identified about 3,000 points within that range. And those points are what we manipulate gently through a motherboard and a controller. and put back in through the motor that creates this vibrational energy that is much more like a musical instrument than a jackhammer. That's the best way I can describe it. And from there, we've now been able, I think we've got about 11,000 of these devices that we've made here in the US that are now throughout the world and helping an awful lot of people. We hear from parents every day about their child with autism that starts speaking after they've been using our device on them, or we hear from parents of a child or an adult with a brain injury or concussion, and it's made this change, or it's finally taken the tension out of their jaw so that they can sleep better, and their brain is improving. So we've just got so much feedback from people over the past number of years that it has been life-changing for them. It's gotten to the point where I no longer have the ability to practice my general physical therapy because I don't have time to. Most of my time is now spent on Zoom calls with doctors, helping them understand how to help their patients better. And I love it. I love seeing the difference that it's making for people.
Oh yeah, that's got to be so rewarding. That's such a beautiful thing. What types of doctors are using this? Like, where is it being used and how is it helping people?
Well, just as just as it's being used at Cognitive FX, and you've got some of the best doctors there. The home that it's found is really in several arenas. Those who are trying to just treat chronic pain with it, which would include a host of dentists and dental practitioners that work primarily in sleep medicine. They use it for craniofacial pain relief and getting the jaw component of sleep medicine functioning better. The other group would be the functional neurologists, and functional neurologists can come from just about any profession. I would suggest that your doctors at Cognitive FX are functional neurologists, meaning they look at the brain and they look at movement and they look at all of these measurements and they say, I think we can get you moving better and get your brain acting better. And so let's dial in a program for what you particularly need. And they have done very well at that. But functional neurologists might be physical therapists. They may be vision specialists. And they may be nurses, chiropractors, and regular medical doctors as well. But functional, the first part of that, is probably very different than the regular practice of neurology. Our neurologists are great doctors, but they're typically looking at brain and pathway function and medication interventions. Whereas a functional neurologist looks at the brain and says, well, this part of the brain is not functioning very well. We can see that on an EEG. We can see that on an fMRI. Let's design this program to get this part of the body working so that this part of the brain is now connected and functioning well. Mm-hmm. And so those who find themselves in the functional neurology world are absolutely in love with the devices that we've created. The other group that's quite fascinating is athletes. We have a number of athletes that have found that they can enhance their performance by using vibration to drive information and information to the brain while they're performing activities. So we've got a couple of Olympic athletes that use our device for training and for brain training while they're getting into the functional neurology of their training, and it's kind of fun.
Oh, that's super interesting. So would it help also, as I'm hearing you say that it helps with the learning, like, is that more on the physical side, or would it be helpful for students who are trying to drive that learning as well? Could that be a use for it?
Yeah, well, we see a particular use in children with ADHD and learning issues. But yes, absolutely incredible for getting the right and left hemispheres of the brain talking and communicating. And the better their connections are, the better that a child can learn and retain the learning and then be able to put it back out into application. or test taking.
Mm-hmm. So, and is this a device that people like? It sounds like there's a bunch of professionals that are using it in clinics and things. Are people? It sounds like people can also have it at their house. Like you're selling to individuals as well as to professionals.
So professionals understand it from a physiologic and a brain perspective, but it's really my favorite place to place it is in the hands of a mother, because she can do so much good for her children. And our females have a more difficult time navigating the channels of stress than our males do. And it's just in a way that their brain is designed. You have 9.5 times more white matter in your brain than I do. That's just on average. White matter is the connections, right? You as a female, you have 9.5 times more white matter, which means you've got fiber optic cabling in your brain, and I've got these little farm paths that just kind of meander all over the place in my brain. That gives you the ability to multitask, and gives most men an inability to do that. But we have 6.5 times more gray matter. So we're really good at processing and calculating, but we're not very fast at making all of these connections happen. Those are brain differences. But taking these brain differences and taking energy to be able to connect the dots a little bit faster in the brain helps absolutely everybody. One of the biggest things that's hard in learning is the role of the anxiety chemicals. So let me illustrate that with a something that happened not too long ago. A mother called me from the school and she said, "My child needs to take a test. And they're putting a lot of pressure on, and my child is freaking out and she's screaming." This is at the school. She's in a near hysteria. She says, "Would you bring your device up there and show them, calm her down, help her to be able to take the test. She needs to take it." So I, run up to the grade school, and this young lady is in tears. And I mean, just the energy is palpable. But I looked at her and I thought, so let's see. She's right-handed. So the left side of her body is probably the best place to put an input. I took our little device, I stuck it under her foot on the left side of her, and I just asked her to hum to it for a minute. And so I'm sending energy information up through the left side of her body, which is being read in the right brain. Pretty quick, the right brain starts balancing out the left brain, which was overloaded, which was causing the anxiety. And pretty quick, took about a minute and a half, she was completely calm. I said, "Okay, I'm probably done." And I headed out. But Mom called me later that day and she said she sat right down, had no more problems, took the test, did fine. And everybody was blown away by this. Well, this is functional neurology. This is just taking the brain and looking at it and saying, okay, you've overwhelmed these networks, and they're probably more significant in the dominant portions of her brain. Let's just send information into the other side, bring balance back, and you create a happy kid.
That is awesome. That sounds very appealing, I'm sure, to all parents out there. Yeah, oh my gosh, I have so many more questions for you about this, but I know we're probably going to need to wrap up in a little bit here. But there's so much. It sounds like there's a lot of applications for this. I'm curious on tell me how it affects chronic pain, and tell me too about the different points that, like, you put it on her foot, like where on the body does it? It probably depends on what issues people are having. Let's hear about chronic pain as well as like where and how you use it, if that's okay.
Boy, I could take 3 days just on those questions.
I'm sure. I'm like,
Let's do it really quick. Okay, essentially everybody has heard about meridian points, acupuncture points. They've heard about, there are all kinds of ways to describe what God created in our nervous system, which is simply that we have nerves that connect everything so that our brain knows where every part of us is at all times. Essentially, we found that we can take those same points, these meridians, these acupuncture points, these trigger points, if you will, and essentially place vibration on them. And especially if we can connect vibration here and vibration here at the same time, the brain gets a faster calibration that teaches it how to keep or maintain its balance again. So we have hit those points on the hands, on the feet, on the toes, on the fingers, and everywhere from there up to the brain. We have found all kinds of points where we can enter the nervous system and send these messages. And we've created, tools, different ways of being able to do that. This is our new device. Those of you who are listening can't see, but it's got a little face of a cat kind of on there, huh?
It does look like
but we actually created these wings surrounding our device so that you can use them to scrape while you're sending this vibrational energy up to the brain. So the brain gets a calibration and an understanding of where the parts and pieces are. That brings a calming to the central nervous system that is just incredible. So if I take you back, you learned about this by visiting with a wonderful couple. The very first day that I met them, they had to travel over an hour to come up and see me in my clinic. And Jeremy was, well, you could just tell he was a little frustrated at being there. He didn't feel very confident in the process. But my hopes were to be able to get his central nervous system to start talking right and left sides. As soon as we started using the device on both points, both sides of his face, both sides of his head, the lights turned on in his eyes, and you could actually see and feel a change that had come about because his brain was starting to communicate right and left sides again. It had taken a big hit to his jaw to throw that all offline, but it was so fun to watch it start coming back online. And then, it takes time and a little bit of training and learning for everything to come back online. But that was so fun to be able to watch the first stages of the brain coming back online and watching the tool that we had created help him to do that.
And that too. It's so cool to hear that.
It's been a miracle to watch that happen, but we just use the understanding of the anatomy and the brain, and we apply the device. I have people hum while they're using it. That slows down their breathing, which is extremely important. That's a vagus nerve controlled function, is breathing. It also, besides slowing down the breathing, your vagus nerve has a branch that controls your vocal cords. It means it's super tuned into vibration. And so we use all of these little things. And then going back to my time in counseling, I learned that the most important thing that I can fill a person's heart and head and soul with is hope. I ask them while they're using our device to think of things they're super grateful for. And if they can go through their mind and think of the things that are much more important to them, their body starts producing oxycontin, or not their own oxycontin, oxytocin. It starts producing serotonin. It starts producing all of these chemicals that start calming down the stress response. So it's all kinds of little things that we put into this therapy that just teach the nervous system how to start healing and how to start doing better. Can I leave with one other really important thing, though?
Yes.
I want to emphasize one more time. I love seeing our doctors use these tools, but I am happiest when they get into a family, into a home, where they can change the lives of the individuals that need them far more. And truly, you can go and see a doctor and get a treatment with it, and it's helpful. But if you could do it daily for a couple of weeks, your brain will be transformed and functioning much stronger, much better from here forward. So that's my hopes with these tools. I love love to see them helping the world.
Yeah. Oh, that's a beautiful thing. And I was so sorry. I know you said that might be the last thing, but I'm going to ask you more questions really fast here. I remember I watched a video that somebody had done, and it talks about, I'm curious if we can touch briefly too on the primitive reflexes and how it can help with, like, they said that it could help with bedwetting. So here's the thing. And I'll just say this because I'm sure that people listening might be thinking this, like, anytime you hear about a device or something that can cure all of these different things, people are like, yeah, take that with a huge grain of salt. So what is your answer to that? And how can it, like, what other things does it help with?
Well, first of all, they're absolutely right to question it, and I do as well. My wife is the greatest critic, and she's like, how do these things work? Well, after we've seen it work on thousands and thousands of people, we don't wonder that. We just know that it does. But here's the thing. It doesn't cure any of those. It just improves brain function. And the brain functioning correctly takes care of all of those things. The bedwetting is, in particular, and this is a fascinating, there is a spot in your brain that kind of controls the response. We call it the pontine. That's a point in the brain, the pons, the pontine micturition response. So here we're thinking that, it's all down here at the midline that we're having this issue with bedwetting, but it's actually a spot in the brain. And then you do a little bit more research and you find, wait a second, there's a spot on the foot that can affect the pontine area in the brain. And so we start working on these areas of the foot, and it just happens that almost everybody who has at this age where they should be controlled and they're still having problems, they have a primitive reflex still present. They often have this Babinski reflex that's still present, or they may be toe walking, or there are these other signs. What I'm saying is, I'm not trying to change bedwetting. I'm trying to get the brain working better. And by working on the foot and getting rid of a primitive reflex, we see that the person stops having those incidents and it changes their life forever. But it's all about brain function. So we started, you and I have both studied primitive reflexes a long time ago in school, right?
Yep.
But if you went to the same kind of schooling I went to, they said, we shouldn't see these anymore. By the time they're about 2 or 3 years of age, they're done.
They get integrated and they're done.
But the problem is, for a lot of our children that have some developmental delays, and they may be brilliant in certain areas and have a delay in another area. I didn't understand all of that part of development of the human, but they can have a primitive reflex present in one area that affects their ability to control things and yet function very normally in all of the rest of the settings of life. And so these primitive reflexes are something that we like to assess and understand. And I've developed a whole series of videos showing how to use our tools to help with things like the positive spinal galant reflex, or the palmar grasp reflex, or the rooting reflex, which, one of the most fascinating cases of this rooting reflex I saw was in a provider in her late 50s who had a serious tendon laceration in her hand. And as I'm working with her, and she has no sensation down here in her hand, and she's, having a hard time moving things, and she's got a lot of chronic pain. And I said, I'm looking up at your mouth and I see that you've got this thing here. Can I test these things? So I'm looking, she has a palmar grasp reflex that's returned. It was integrated. But a serious injury or illness can cause those reflex patterns to return. She had this strange, pulling down of her mouth here. Well, when I tested her mouth on that side and just did the rooting reflex, her mouth looked just like a little infant kind of going after that stimulus. And she didn't understand this. But since that injury, her abdominal or her bowel system didn't function quite the way that it was supposed to. But you see, her brain, through this injury, had reverted to more of an infantile stage, and those primitive reflexes were popped back out. And when her brain is in a stage where those primitive reflexes are there, remember, developmentally, that's a stage where you're not eating meat. You're not digesting things. That affects the digestive system. So,
Wow.
in the last 10 years, my understanding of the beauty of the system has completely changed as I've started to look at it through the eyes of what is happening at the brain through an injury, through an illness, what is happening at the brain, what's happening there that's not working, that I need to help a person be able to develop. And I know I've got a bajillion stories, but I've got to tell you one more really quick.
Please do.
I have a friend who I saw at the store one day, and his hand is just shaking like crazy. And I'm like, I haven't seen him in a long time, but what is going on? I got home and I called him and I said, look, I didn't want to bring attention to this, but the tremors and stuff. Are you okay? Do you want to visit? This is something that I work with people on. And he said, just broke down and said, I'm in my mid 50s and I'm developing Parkinson's. And I said, look, first of all, don't accept that. I mean, we have to buy into a diagnosis to let it fully continue its process, right? I said, why don't we look at what's not functioning in the brain to be able to allow that to start having the tremors, and what else is affected. And as we started working with him, his balance was not doing very well. His primitive reflexes had popped in. Again, they were all integrated as a very young infant, but they were all popping back in. His brain was going into a primitive state. We started applying these principles. We started having him work through this. And he's gone. He's gone for like 3 or 4 weeks, and then he's back for a week. And he works a lot, but he's maybe going to lose his license here to be able to operate those machines that he operates because of his diagnosis, unless something changed drastically. So I got a note from him a couple of weeks ago, and he said, everybody is noticing my tremors are decreasing. I feel better. I'm able to see the world better. So these are, it's not, when we get a diagnosis, it doesn't mean that that's the end game. We can change these things by changing the way the brain works. If ever somebody has a cool experience with cancer with this, and we've got a number of people that do, it's not because this device treats cancer, it's because there's things happening up here in the brain that if you can improve the function there, your body creates the chemicals and creates the messaging to the rest of the body that helps it be stronger against the rest of the crazy things that are hitting it. Mm-hmm. So we've really created a brain tool. I was just going after creating a chronic pain tool.
Yes, and I love that it's all about the brain, but this is, with concussions, the primitive reflexes, that definitely can come back out again and needs to be reintegrated. As well as, chronic pain can be an issue with people who are dealing with a concussion. There's a lot of, this is very applicable for this audience, I think. And it sounds like for a lot of other people too. So this is fascinating. And thank you for the work you're doing. I am so excited to get my hands on one of those and use it on all of my family members. So this is really, really cool. And I'm excited to see what happens with it. So thank you for the work you're doing. And is there anything else that you want us to know about the device or your work, or just any advice for people in general? I'd love to hear it before we end here.
Well, probably one important thing is that anybody can go onto our website right now and look at the applications or the techniques for many, many conditions. And we have tried our best to just not make anything secret. I mean, our tools are very expensive to create. They're ridiculously expensive to create. But the knowledge of how to use those, I want everybody to have access to that. And so we've worked really hard to teach people how to apply it for animals, how to apply it for all kinds of conditions. But the information is there. We've got a couple hundred videos on our YouTube channel. Our goal is to one day, I hope to not be needed in the process. I hope that I work myself out of a job, that people can just see how to apply these things and be able to self-treat, or our practitioners can learn how to do things even better. Our goals are to be able to help people not need us so much. In fact, the best thing is to have a person say, wow, this was so good for my migraine headaches. And then I ask them, well, how often do you need to use it? Well, I haven't needed to use it in months because I've trained my brain to stop having migraine headaches. That brings me joy.
Yes.
I think one of the worst things that I see right now is the fact that many people feel like they've got to be on medications for the rest of their life. Our goal is to help a person learn how to not need our tools even. I want to get their nervous system functioning better so that they can do everything they need to in life.
Beautiful. And actually that answers the question that I had that I hadn't asked yet. So that's perfect. Thank you. I love that. And why don't you say it on here? Like, what is your website? We'll also obviously put it in the show notes so people can look you up, but how can they learn more, access you, all of that?
The website is www.rezzimax.com.
Okay.
Rezzimax, by the way, stands for resonance. The Z's in resonance or Rezzimax is because sleep improvement is one of the first things people see when they use our tools. And the Max comes from the name of our physical therapy company, which is Maximum Function Physical Therapy. So this is truly a resonance device to improve your function to the best. That's our goal behind it.
Perfect. That's beautiful. Thank you so much for what you're doing. And thank you for being here today. I really appreciate your sharing this with us.
Thank you for sharing your passion with the world.
I'm so glad you listened in today. I hope you have gained some helpful insights and inspiration regarding dealing with and recovering from concussions. My goal is to create more awareness and education about concussions and the fact that there is so much that can be done to improve life after someone has had one. Help me spread the message by liking, commenting, rating, and subscribing to this podcast, and share it with others who would benefit from hearing it. There are more resources available on my website. And again, if you or someone you love would benefit from concussion coaching, sign up for a free consultation using the link in the show notes or at my website, www.theconcussioncoach.com. Thank you. See you next time, and take good care of that amazing brain of yours.